The United States of America is preparing to carry out extensive ground operations inside Iran, and that is through. The primary goal of these operations is to overthrow the regime in Tehran. This matter has become clear from what was published by British ITV News and American CNN. The Wall Street Journal reports that the American side is making plans to depend on the Iranian Kurds and also on the Iranian Kurdish opposition parties that are currently situated in the Kurdistan region. However, their primary reliance will be to a greater degree on the Iranian Kurds themselves, who make up approximately 8 to 17% of the entire Iranian population, with their total numbers estimated to be somewhere between 7 and 15 million people. They are spread across these regions, which are highlighted in yellow in northwestern Iran as well as northeastern Iran. However, the primary reliance is placed upon those who are specifically located within northwestern Iran. This can be attributed to a multitude of factors. The specific choice of Iranian Kurds in particular stems from their long-standing and significant conflict with the Iranian regime. They have consistently demanded self-governance and their fundamental rights, which they have never received. When the Islamic Revolution erupted in Iran in 1979, a significant conflict arose between the Iranian regime and the Kurds, who had by then transformed into opposing Iranian Kurdish parties. Consequently, they were unable to maintain their positions and were forced to leave Iran. And there were numerous opposition Kurdish parties that relocated to the Kurdistan region due to these challenging circumstances, and these tensions continued to escalate until we reached the tragic incident involving Mahsa Amini in 2022, specifically in September. She was an Iranian Kurdish citizen who was arrested by the morality police because of her way of wearing the hijab was not appropriate from the Iranian regime's perspective. She was subjected to a brutal beating, and subsequently she passed away, leading to the eruption of protests in this manner. It all began in Saqqez, located in the province of Kurdistan. Initially in Mahsa Amini's hometown, it then spread to West Azerbaijan, and following that we witnessed these widespread demonstrations, and subsequently our focus shifted to the issue of Israeli strikes against Iran. In 2024, there were 2 attacks on Iran, and then in 2025, we witnessed the 12-day war. Also, after that, in December, at the end of last December, very widespread demonstrations began, and the Kurds were a significant part of them. And of course, the Iranian regime here confronted the Kurds very harshly. لكن ده الشديد ده the details published by Forbes which confirmed that Kurds constituted 14% of all executions carried out by the Iranian state. Additionally, 47% of those detained in Iran during 2025 were Iranian Kurds, despite the fact that they represent only 8 to 17% of the total population. Furthermore, the Iranian regime has continued its targeting of the Iranian Kurdish opposition parties in the Kurdistan region, given that there are problems with these groups. The Iranian regime views these specific parties as posing a considerable danger, and following this, specific arrangements were put in place between the Iraqi government and the Iranian side to avert this escalation, as revealed by the details published from these sources over the last 24 hours. That it was during Operation Rising Lion, also known as the 12-day war, that matters evolved quite significantly for the Israeli side, naturally, because following this conflict, there was an operation that took place, and specifically an arming operation, according to ITV News, was carried out to supply Iranian Kurdish groups within Iran. The weapons have been brought in to equip armed groups for a confrontation with the Iranian regime. The American CNN has reported that the CIA has begun working on a process to send more weapons and to arrange the positioning of these factions in preparation for an upcoming confrontation and to carry out ground operations against the Iranian regime. The weapons had essentially already been transferred, and we need to comprehend how these weapons are reaching these specific parties. There were numerous arms shipments that we observed following the 12-day conflict, and even prior to that 12-day war, they arrived in Baku, Azerbaijan, which subsequently opens a clear pathway for delivering weapons to these armed individuals. Iran has also consistently accused the Kurdistan region of weapons constantly being smuggled into its territory for the benefit of armed factions opposing the Iranian government, and even from Turkey. The Iranian regime also confirmed in recent months that they seized a weapons shipment that had entered from the Turkish border, intended for these Kurdish parties, of course. And similarly, and at the same time, we must not forget the Caspian Sea, which is considered a crucial point from which special operations can be launched to deliver supplies to these armed Kurdish factions, enabling them to carry out the required missions. And naturally, the opposition Iranian Kurdish parties, after agreeing with the Iraqi government to distance them to a safe zone, which they call the buffer zone from the border with Iran, they deployed in these areas at these points. Let's zoom in a bit, and you will notice that they are at a good distance and not in contact with the border with Iran, so there are no risks. However, there was a particularly intriguing report that emerged just 8 days prior to the outbreak of the war. We are currently observing within Iranian territory. This very report had captured significant interest from the Israeli naval fleet, specifically regarding their advanced fighter jets. These were primarily Iranian Kurdish women who appeared in this form, undergoing training. And as sources at the time, Hisafi and specifically Israeli sources deeply interested in this issue, reported that these factions were training in a secret location in northern Iraq to confront the Iranian regime. And these women and female fighters with training exercises, they declared their preparations to face this Iranian regime as operations persist, fundamentally targeting the regime itself. Consequently, a significant amount of training footage they're conducting has appeared, and if just the nature of this site, and simply observe this landscape, considering the highlands and the regional context. If we look at the satellite, I will see that this area is indeed far from the Iranian border. The site's locality is located approximately 20 kilometers to the east of Erbil. It was precisely within this particular area that the training exercises were carried out for these female combatants, specifically those who are Iranian women. Therefore, this is the image that perfectly matches what we have seen. It confirms to you that they are indeed present within this specific area, and consequently this very point where the training operation is taking place is situated approximately 60 or even more than 60 kilometers from the border with Iran. Interestingly, 2 days after this report, an alliance was announced between all or most of the Iranian Kurdish opposition parties located in the Kurdistan region. And because the current situation demands it, there is a potential for a significant change to the Iranian regime. Immediately after that, we witnessed the war on the 28th of February. And today, this significant Iranian Kurdish opposition party, which is also based in the Kurdistan region, declared its complete alignment with these other Iranian Kurdish opposition groups. Consequently, we are now witnessing the formation of an alliance. They have decided to set aside their existing disputes and disagreements for future discussion. And for now, the primary focus is on bringing down the Iranian regime. However, generally speaking, the statements coming from the authorities in the Kurdistan region confirm that these parties will not enter into any conflict, and there is a certain level of reassurance that matters will not escalate further. But it's important to note that the Iranian Kurdistan Democratic Party received a call from US President Donald Trump, who directly contacted the party's leader. This comes after a call from US President Donald Trump to the leaders of the Kurdistan region. And of course, this well, this issue is extremely important for the United States of America, generally speaking, in confronting the Iranian regime. Why? Because the Kurds are not only considered among the fiercest and most courageous fighters throughout history. No, not at all. It's also due to the presence of the mountains. They are exceptionally skilled at fighting in mountainous terrain. The Zagros Mountains specifically are extremely high altitude regions. Therefore, if they manage to obtain the required weapons, they are certainly capable of achieving a great many successes. And this is the core problem that Israel and the United States are facing. By striking deep into Iranian territory, Israel has certainly achieved a great deal in terms of results. They've gained air freedom in these blue-marked regions, reaching all the way to Tehran and even extending to Isfahan. However, these particular strikes are simply not sufficient. They do not completely eliminate the personnel of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, nor do they fully eradicate the Basij forces. Because the Basij forces, Habana, whose numbers specifically reach 640,000 fighters, and they are the ones confronting the demonstrations, with the protesters being essentially unarmed. They are under heavy surveillance and can be suppressed at any moment they try to take to the streets in any region, not only in Tehran, but also in these other regions. Consequently, the American side, basically, and even the Israeli, when they are targeting these specific groups, they are not able to strike them directly. Therefore, Al-Halaf is sending weapons now to these currently existing Iranian Kurdish opposition factions and to the Kurdish armed militants. Specifically in these very regions that their arming and their organization will undoubtedly open the door to a direct engagement with these particular factions, leading to their encirclement and inflicting much greater losses. For furthermore, they are going to gather in significant numbers to confront these Iranian Kurdish factions. And once they are assembled, they will become easy targets to be directly struck by the Israeli Air Force or even the American Air Force. This will cause them to be cornered and significantly weakened, forcing them to focus their attention on the armed militants and ultimately opening the door for the unarmed protesters to gain full control of official Iranian government buildings, leading to a direct and immediate change in the regime itself. And the Israeli side is focusing its strikes on the borders, specifically the Iranian as well as the Iraqi, and on the points of the guard and Basij continuously in these regions. And you notice here, as the Israeli Ministry of Defense published how they carry out operations inside Lebanese territory against Hezbollah, and they strike these points, a large part of which are specifically the areas where Iranian Kurds are located. And observe here, from the recent strikes over the past 24 hours, there's a significant concentration on the red points by both the Israeli and American sides in targeting all points that are coming towards the Iraqi border, with a particular emphasis on the Iranian capital, Tehran. And here, you'll notice a clearer image showing an escalation in the strikes, and the larger the circle grows, the clearer it becomes that there's a focus on this point. Consequently, the operations are extremely numerous. And also one of the operations proving this point is what happened today. The strikes that came towards Bana, which is extremely important. At this point, notice, if we look at Bana and the footage from there, a very large explosion occurred, impacting the area in this manner. What exactly was hit, identified by these markers, we'll see, and also by the street. The specific point targeted in Bana is almost in the western part of Bana. This is Bana, located near the Iraqi border, as we can see. This is the exact point where the imaging process originated. Once we stop at this specific part, we'll notice we're facing almost the same mark. This is the very same landmark, the same structure, and the same road, and therefore the targeting and the explosion seem to have occurred in this specific area, which if we were to proceed towards it, we would observe that it's certainly not a civilian location, but instead it's a place where a multitude of weapons are present. It appears to be a camp at first glance, as we can observe. But when you delve deeper into the true nature of this location and what it holds, you will clearly notice that there are buried weapons, as is quite evident, and this scattered arrangement found beneath the soil indicates they are highly explosive. There were also more explosions and strikes that targeted members of the army, the Basij, and others. This distinctive building appeared in a photograph taken from behind it, revealing that there had been an explosion originating from the building approximately in this direction within this open area. This is the picture of the explosion, and this is the same building we saw, of course, and identified a moment ago. Therefore, by analyzing this image, we can clearly see that we are looking at a military camp that was specifically targeted in this particular area. This is a complete camp, as we observe, belonging to the Iranian army, in addition to striking one of the points that appears to be a Basij or police outpost. Specifically, this area, all these strikes took place today in Ban, the border region with Iraq, as we can see. Therefore, the camera angle was specifically chosen from here to truly illustrate to you from this very same location that these particular buildings had been completely destroyed, as we can clearly observe. Also in Sardasht, as we can observe, a city situated near the Iraqi border, there were significant strikes targeting the Basij and other groups, extremely dangerous carpet bombings, and also the main police headquarters in Ilam was completely destroyed. Consequently, the police, the Basij, intelligence, everyone connected to security, from leadership to simple personnel, all headquarters are being constantly targeted in order to continuously undermine the border's position and to impose the desired control, of course, over Shia, over this entire region, and to begin advancing in the direction of Tehran. And the other, that more importantly, it now appears quite certain that American B-52 Tusha, the top of two E-52 strategic bombers are being used, having begun to strike Tehran massively, following some contact with a B-52 aircraft yesterday over the Mediterranean Sea, after its return from an operation it had essentially completed. From what appears to be Iraqi airspace, or that it entered Iranian airspace and carried it out, communication between it and the KC-135 aircraft. They simply state, as shown in the recordings, that there were several refueling planes that supplied the B-52s whose identities were unknown. Therefore, these are natural communications here, as we can see, or normal. This is Cyprus, and here, as we observe, are Israel and Lebanon. Consequently, there were clear communications confirming that the B-52s had commenced operations. You also observe, for instance, Tehran today noted the successive widespread carpet bombings, which also provides another indication that the B-52s have indeed begun to be utilized, especially since U.S. Central Command announced that the B-1B Lancer was deployed. Israel indicated that the B-2 was used. I'm talking about the Israeli media campaigns that they claimed the B-2 was also used. So we are truly facing extremely difficult circumstances. The Iranian side is suffering. The launch of ballistic missiles has now decreased. We are now on the 5th day of this war. Observe how, as of yesterday, the launch of ballistic missiles has both altered and decreased. Das Hanif hier, and as we can observe, the United Arab Emirates this has been the nation most subjected to aerial attacks when compared to Bahrain, Qatar, Kuwait, or any other country in the region. However, despite these numerous assaults, the attacks targeting the Emirates have also seen a substantial reduction, as we could clearly see even as recently as yesterday. Just observe the extent of this decline. And this shows you that there has been success in striking Iranian missile platforms and missile capabilities, and the Iranian regime has somewhat begun to face difficulties in launching missiles. This is very clear, of course, from the data coming from the Ministry of Defense in the United Arab Emirates, as well as in Qatar. From the last statistics, it seems that the Iranian side launched between 1,000 and 1,500 missiles, including both medium-range and short-range types. As for drones, between 2,000 and 3,000 unmanned aerial vehicles were used over a period of 4 days. Today, it's very clear that there's a significant decrease in attacks by the Iranian side on Israel and the region in general. And of course, the Balok have now also started operations, which they announced in southern Iran and southeastern Iran here in Zahedan. This is, of course, a grave matter for police patrol. They also began attacking, and so multiple opposition groups to the Iranian regime started carrying out operations. What is the Iranian regime doing?
And what is Iran doing amidst all this news?
Sure.
The Iranian side, along with Iraqi factions, has started to escalate the attacks, as we observe, targeting the Kurdistan region to weaken the Iranian Kurdish opposition parties located in this region, because they fully realize that the border situation has come under fire and they are attempting to confront these groups.
The armed Iranian forces located inside Iran to prevent any possible ground operations that might come with air support from the United States.
It brings about many consequences for Iran's internal affairs and would be dangerous for the regime. And Iran still holds the reins of power, closing the Strait of Hormuz here, and the circumstances remain difficult.
Now, Iran is still targeting commercial vessels. At least 2 ships have been attacked. Just today, a ship attempting to navigate through the Strait of Hormuz was targeted very recently. Official statements from the White House have now confirmed that the United States will have its American Navy escort all vessels generally in order to ensure the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz.
And also the Reuters agency and several Iranian agencies have confirmed that Mojtaba Khamenei is indeed the next supreme leader. This is a profoundly significant spiritual matter, extremely important for the Iranian regime to re-establish itself in confronting Israel and facing the imminent dangers